Good day. So in today's session, let me get straight into sharing my screen. Where is that option? Here. This one, yes. We are going to be looking at the circulatory system, or you could pronounce it circulatory system. It really depends, tomato, tomato. It's simple. It's similar to the respiratory system or the respiratory system, right? So the circulatory system, what is it? So as you hear the word circulatory, the key word that you think of there is circulate. What is to circulate? We know to circulate something means to spread, right? Or to move around or about, right? And that is exactly what the circulatory system does in the human body. We would have looked at the digestive system previously. We would have looked at the respiratory system previously. Now we're going to be looking at the circulatory system. So we know as humans, we need to constantly exchange substances within our environment. And to do that, we usually take in useful substances. So this goes back to digestion. When we consume food, goes back to respiratory system. When you breathe in oxygen and so on, those are useful substances, right? And we also need to get rid of waste. And this is what the circulatory system helps to do. So they all work in a very symbiotic type of way. So your digestive, respiratory, and your circulatory system all combine together to help our body function properly. So the circulatory system provides a means of transporting these substances between surfaces where they are exchanged, not just in your organs, but in your cells as well. Remember, we are also looking down to the cellular level where things tend to happen. So the circulatory system is composed of the cardiovascular system. When you think of the word cardiovascular, we think of heart, right? So you think of your heart, which is a very important organ. When you think of cardio, you think of exercising and working out, and you tend to might get out of breath and so on because you're kind of working your heart a little bit, right? You're making your heart have to pump blood a little bit more to get oxygen flowing faster throughout your body. So it's composed of the cardiovascular system as well as the lymphatic system. But what is the lymphatic system? So as I explained, cardiovascular refers to your heart. Your lymphatic system, right? Further down in the notes, I will explain better. But the lymphatic system, generally, you think of lymph nodes and so on. What are lymph nodes? So lymph nodes are located as part of your immune system. And what they tend to do is they tend to protect you, against foreign antibodies that may enter into your body and try to cause harm. So we have our lymph nodes which react negatively to getting the virus, getting some sort of infection, cancer, HIV, as I said, viruses, diseases, cancers, and so on. It tends to send your lymphatic system into overdrive. So that's what your lymphatic system basically deals with, right? And of course, because, your body might be fighting a particular infection, whatever the case may be, the same way as I just indicated, we are taking in substances, useful substances, we also need to get rid of waste or harmful substances within our body, right? So the cardiovascular system helps to transport all of those good substances as well as the lymphatic system, but it also helps to get rid of those waste substances that are produced in our body as a result of different processes that are taking place, right? So what is the need for a transport system in the human body? Well, the absorption and transport of substances in humans is affected by two factors: the surface area to volume ratio, so the surface area of your organs and vessels and so on, to the volume of what needs to be transported, as well as the limitations of simple diffusion. So remember, diffusion has to do with air, right? So all of the gases and so on needs to be dissolved into the relevant substances to become useful, because oxygen needs to be infused or dissolved within plasma in order for us to be able to breathe, because that's the only way that we are able to survive. Our cells and stuff need oxygen. How are they getting oxygen? We breathe in the oxygen, but when it comes into our body as a gas, it doesn't remain as a gas, right? It dissolves into our blood, right? So this is where we talk about the absorption and transport of substances and how it is affected. So humans have a small surface area to volume ratio. Diffusion through their body surface is not adequate to supply all their body cells with their requirements and also remove waste. In addition, most of their body is too far from its surface for substances to move through it by simple diffusion. Humans have therefore developed a transport system to carry useful substances from specialized organs that absorb them. For example, the lungs and the ileum. Remember, the lungs make up the part of the respiratory system. The ileum, which is the small intestine, makes up part of the digestive system, right? So these are the parts, the useful parts that carry waste substances from the body cells to specialized organs that excrete them. So we have, and this is another system that we'll be looking at after, the excretory system, right? So the excretory system would include your kidney and lungs. So your kidneys usually excrete any urea, any waste, salts, mineral substances, and so on. So it is a very, very, very important organ, right? The same way that we like to take care of our heart and lungs and so on, we should also be very mindful that we have other organs which are just as useful, right? If not more useful to a certain degree, because you need to get rid of waste from your body, right? It's great that we are able to take in useful substances, oxygen, eat food, and all of that. All of that is great, but when it goes through the various processes, it must get rid of the waste that is produced, right? So materials transported around the human body. The following materials are transported around the human body, right? We have useful substances such as oxygen, water, digested food, which comprises mainly of glucose and amino acids. So when it is your body goes through the process of digestion, all of the nice Subway and pilau and macaroni pie and callaloo that you eat, your body isn't absorbing that, right? It is absorbing the minerals and vitamins and so on that is found in those foods, right? So this is why it's important, you know, we always say make sure and eat a balanced diet. Foods that are high in iron, rich in minerals, and so on is very important, right? So the glucose and amino acids, building blocks of protein, always remember that. So the vitamins, minerals, hormones, antibodies, and plasma proteins. Heat is also carried. So heat is one of the byproducts of digestion. It's for this reason, when we consume food, when we are eating, our body actually heats up a little bit, right? So during the process of digestion, heat is also one of the byproducts of digestion, right? And then another material that is transported around the human body is waste substances, such as carbon dioxide. So when we breathe out, when we breathe in, we take in oxygen. When we breathe out carbon dioxide, right? And nitrogenous waste such as urea. And this is what I'm saying, is excreted in the bladder and the kidneys, right? So the materials that are transported, we have useful substances and waste substances being transported. So moving on, the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system consists of blood, which serves as a medium to transport substances around the body. So this is very much self-explanatory, because we know for a fact blood is what is transporting. Oxygen is transporting all of the food and the minerals and so on that we get from food is contained in our blood. And it is for this reason, when we do our blood work and so on, we're able to see exactly what we have. If there's a deficiency of something, if we are sick with something, right? If there are any cancer cells developing and so on, blood work is one of the means by which we're able to test for these things, right? Blood vessels, which are tubes through which the blood flows to and from all parts of the body. So all of this make up the cardiovascular system. And lastly, we have the heart. And the purpose of the heart is an organ which pumps the blood through the blood vessels. So just to reiterate, the cardiovascular system consists of blood, which serves as the medium to transport the substances around the body. Blood vessels, which are the tube by which the blood is able to flow through to and from parts of the body, and as well as the heart, which allows for pumping that same blood throughout the vessels. So you're moving in a particular order. You need blood first and foremost, then you need the vessels. So the vessels would be like the tunnels. Think about a transport system in Trinidad and Tobago, right? So you have, first of all, your car, which is your mode of transport. It is the medium by which you can get from point A to point B. So your car, your van, your bus, your truck, whatever it may be, right? Your roads would serve as your blood vessels, right? So your blood vessels would be like your roads by which you are able to move to different parts of Trinidad and Tobago, right? And then, of course, the heart would be represented by, say, the engine or whatever inside the vehicle, because without that, then your blood is of no use. It can't move, right? You have to have something to be able to actually move your vehicle, and that is what the engine part of your vehicle is. So your heart basically is like the engine of your vehicle, and it's able to move that vehicle then through the roads and so on. So what happens when something goes wrong with the engine? It shuts down. So what happens with your heart? You die, right? It shuts down. And if your heart shuts down, which is like your engine shutting down for your vehicle, you aren't able to move from point A to point B, right? So the first one, blood. What is blood? Blood is composed of 3 types of cells. So we think to ourselves, well, blood is just a red liquid, right? But really and truly, blood consists of many different things that give it not just its color, but its ability to do what it does for the human body. So the first thing we want to look at is red blood cells, right? Red blood cells, white blood cells, as well as platelets. So these cells are suspended in a fluid called plasma, right? So the liquid that blood is actually made up of is called plasma, right? The cells make up about 45% by volume of the blood, and the plasma makes up about 55%. So when you get a cut and you see your blood flowing, it's not just plasma that is flowing out. 45% of that that's flowing out is made up of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So if you look at the diagram here, you would see red blood cells and what they look like. Remember, I had indicated that when we were looking at the respiratory system, right, red blood cells are shaped like a disc with a hollow kind of indentation in them. And the purpose of that is to trap the oxygen to be able to transport it to various parts of the body, right? So, okay, so for some reason, my internet connection dropped. I'm not sure if the audio and video is able to act the way that it's supposed to act, right? So I will just go back to the last part that I stopped, which is the composition of plasma. So plasma is a yellowish fluid composed of about 90% water and 10% dissolved substances, right? So we know when we get a cut, I don't know if you've ever noticed, when you get a cut and sometimes it's healing a little bit, the surface of the cut looks a little yellowish. And the reason behind that is because that is the plasma that you are seeing, right? It's a yellowish fluid. So sometimes, you might have a pimple, you pop the pimple, and then it bleeds a little bit. And as it bleeds, it crusts over with a little yellow kind of crusty kind of bead or bump or button or whatever. And that is plasma that you are seeing, right? So in case you're wondering what that yellow substance is that you're seeing, is plasma, right? So plasma consists of not just 90% water, 10% dissolved substances. You have products of digestion, which goes into the plasma, such as the glucose, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. You have waste products such as dissolved carbon dioxide and urea. You have hormones, insulin and thyroxine, and plasma proteins, right? So this is a little bit more scientific here, the plasma proteins. You have fibrinogen, prothrombin, albumin, and antibodies, right? And what does plasma actually do? The main functions of plasma, right? So its purpose is transporting the following: products of digestion from the ileum to the liver and the body cells, carbon dioxide from body cells to the lungs, urea from the liver to the kidneys, hormones from the glands that produce them, so your endocrine glands, so your endocrine system, right? As well as your target organs, right? So when we're looking at the excretory system, I think we would be looking at how hormones are also going about in our body, and we might have to look at the endocrine system a little bit as well, right? Good night. Okay, so this is, I had to actually do the recording in parts because I was getting a lot of Wi-Fi issues. So I decided what I would have started with in terms of the circulatory system, I would put a pin on it. So that brief introduction that would have been given where I explained, the circulatory system, what it is, what it consists of, and then we started to talk about plasma. I am going to actually look at some past papers with you because let's see, I feel like hide meeting, hide floating, meeting controls. Good. Um, right. I decided that, we never looked or explored past papers before, and I wanted to kind of prepare you in terms of answering some of the questions that may come for final exams, or, because I'm not sure if Ms. Heuermann would just bring past paper for you all for exam, and you should be prepared to answer it. You should have an idea as to how you would go about answering any of these questions. So some of the questions we have not touched on those topics as yet, but it is questions that I am able to answer. So what I will do is we will go through the questions and I will answer them, and you can write down the answers. So as I'm explaining, you can write down the answers. This paper, I believe it's Ms. Heuermann has this on the Google Classroom for you all, right? So it is the May-June 2023, so last year's HSB paper, right? And I've noticed a pattern that they do like to bring a lot of social questions. You would realize that it's a mix. It's not just science, as we have been doing more of the science part, the scientific part of HSB. But there's also the human interaction part, because it's human and social biology. So a lot of these questions deal with the social aspects as well. And I feel like you should be well-rounded, and I should try to train you to be able to answer some of these questions. So first question, right? Section A, it says answer all questions. So the first question: prostate cancer is one of the main cancers that affects the male reproductive system, right? So as the name suggests, prostate cancer affects the prostate, right? The prostate is only found in men. Name one other cancer that affects the male reproductive system. So if you don't have any answer in mind, testicular cancer is another cancer that affects the male reproductive system. So the testes, right, which is located inside of the scrotum, that can also become cancerous, right? List 3 signs or symptoms of prostate cancer. So some basic signs and symptoms of prostate cancer would be painful ejaculation, right? Men have complained about painful ejaculation. They have spoken about pain in the hips, the back. Some of them get pain during urination, burning during urination as well, blood in the urine, right? So these, I've listed, of course, more than 3, but those are just some of the signs or symptoms of prostate cancer, right? Identify 2 risks of developing, no, sorry, identify 2 risks for developing prostate cancer. So what this question is asking is basically, who is at risk for developing prostate cancer? That's essentially what they are asking here. So who is at risk? I would say elderly person. So it's something that is really more prevalent in older gentlemen as opposed to young. It doesn't mean that young men will not get prostate cancer. That's not at all what I'm saying, but it is mostly prevalent in the elderly, right? So as your age goes up or you become elderly, you become at risk for developing prostate cancer. Also your ethnicity. So Black men or African men, right? They are at risk as well. Because we're speaking about the Caribbean, of course, we're not talking about the US or worldwide. We're speaking generally about the Caribbean, and as opposed to the Indian community, right? It's not to say that Indian people won't get prostate cancer, but it's more prevalent. My husband's father actually had prostate cancer, and it went into remission. Thankfully, they were able to discover it in time and so on. And he took the necessary treatment and precautions and so on. But that then means that it could be something that is passed on genetically, right? So then that means my husband is at risk and my sons are at risk, right? I have two boys and they have their father genetics. And so sometimes it may even skip a generation. So my father-in-law would have it, and then it skips my husband totally, and it can go to my son. So genetics play a factor, it's a risk factor. Age is a risk factor. Ethnicity is a risk factor as well, right? Okay, let's see. Let's see what this table is trying to show us here. Let me bring down the zoom a little bit. Right. So table 1 shows the responses of men in the Caribbean to a survey about their beliefs concerning prostate cancer. So the top row here indicates belief, right? So it has whether or not they strongly agree in the first column, whether they just agree, right? The third, they disagree, and the last column, strongly disagree. And these are some of the questions that they were asked. And of course, these were the responses. So I can reduce my risk of getting prostate cancer. According to the survey, 60% of the participants disagreed. They don't believe that they can reduce their risk of getting prostate cancer. They disagree, right? I disagree that I can reduce my risk of getting prostate cancer. Apparently, they are of the belief that there's no way that you can reduce the risk, you just get it. It's either you get it or you don't get it. But that's not true, right? And of course, we will speak a little bit more on that. Prostate cancer testing is embarrassing for me. 49% agree that it's embarrassing, right? 28% strongly agree that it's embarrassing. So if you look at the agree as opposed to disagree, the agree takes up majority. So 49 plus 28 is how much? 77. So 77% of the participants agree that it's just embarrassing to go through any form of prostate cancer testing. Prostate cancer cannot be treated once it's discovered. Let's see how many persons are ignorant. Wow, 69% in total. So 50% agree that once prostate cancer has been diagnosed, it cannot be treated once you discover it. Crazy. And 19% also strongly disagree. Sorry, strongly agree. So 50 plus 90, there's 69% in the agreement that prostate cancer cannot be treated. That's ridiculous. Only elderly gentlemen get prostate cancer. Wow. 61% strongly agree, 15% agree, right? So there's 76% of the participants actually really agree that only elderly gentlemen get prostate cancer. It's crazy. Right, so let's see what the questions are with respect to the information. So using the data in table 1, state 3 reasons why the mortality rates for prostate cancer in the Caribbean are high. So what is mortality? The word mortality means death, right? So they are asking why the death rate for prostate cancer is high, just based off of the information here. Well, it could be said that, you know, based on the survey that was done, they want 3 reasons. 60%, so the first reason you can indicate, right, is that 60% disagree that they could reduce the risk of getting prostate cancer. 61% strongly agree that only elderly persons get prostate cancer, right? And another reason why the mortality rate for prostate cancer is very high is because 49%, or a huge portion of the male population in the Caribbean, feel embarrassed to get their prostates checked, right? So getting your prostates checked, Jeremiah, it involves something known as DRE, and that is called a direct rectal exam or examination, right? So it involves the doctor. Of course, he used gloves, and it involves the patient or the well, obviously it's a man because it's a prostate is being checked, right? So it has to do with where the prostate is located. So the prostate is actually located very close to the rectum. That is how it's able to be checked, and it is for this reason that the doctor would then insert a finger into the rectum, and this is what makes men very uncomfortable. Now, we have had advancements since then where while the direct rectal exam or the DRE is the best method because it actually checks for lumps. Remember, cancers, Jeremiah, produces lumps and so on in the body. It could be anywhere of the body. But if it is, you're specifically looking for any abnormalities, checking physically, doing a physical examination is important. And this is one of the ways that it could be done. But again, since we've had advancements in science and so on, we do blood work now. So I think most doctors would be understanding that a lot of men don't, you know, enjoy having their prostates checked for the simple reason of they don't want anything near their rectum, which is understandable because there's this stigma that, oh my God, once somebody does that, it means they're gay, it means they're like man, and this and ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. It is a medical examination and has no bearing on anybody's sexuality, right? And it honestly is a test that's very important and should be done. So it's very similar to women who suffer from breast cancer and cervical cancer. So women who suffer from breast cancer, they need to have a mammogram done, which involves nurses checking a woman's breast. But does that mean that that woman becomes a lesbian? I have had a mammogram done. I am happily married with my children, and I have no inclination, to dabble in other sexualities. You are looking at it, you have to look at it from a health perspective, right? So remember, we spoke about the fact that prostate cancer is very prevalent in the African community. You are mixed, right? You are mixed, but you're predominantly African. So it means you could be at risk having prostate exams done when you are, I would say, between late 20s to early 30s is very important. Again, blood work could be done. There's no reason for the DRE or direct rectal examination. If it is your blood work comes back maybe with traces of the cancer cells or whatever, then they may, ask you very gently if it's possible to conduct one of those tests. But more often than not, once it shows up in the blood work, it means that then you are positive for prostate cancer and treatment can begin, right? So all in all, it is for this reason that, mortality rates for prostate cancer is high in the Caribbean. This is just based off the fact that men believe that they could reduce the risk of getting prostate cancer. They believe that, only elderly gentlemen get prostate cancer. They also believe that prostate cancer cannot be treated once it's discovered. And it's also embarrassing. It's also embarrassing for a lot of men to go and have their prostates checked. This is not something they want to discuss with their friends, or they want to tell their wives, like, oh yeah, honey, I'm going to get my prostates checked, you know? I mean, ideally they should, without having to feel embarrassed, right? But we will speak a little bit more about that as the questions progress. So, at the age of 43, Paul, a husband and father of three teenage sons, was diagnosed with late stage prostate cancer. So, notice 46 is not old, right? He was treated for 2 years but eventually died. So, just three ways in which Paul's early death could have impacted his family. So, it indicates here that he has three teenage sons, right? So, I would like to think that is a growing stage and a developing point for boys, right? Where they need that male figure in their life, right? You need that guidance in your life, somebody to look up to, right? You can't, I'm not saying, and this has no bearing on single mothers out there, because I cannot do what a single mother does, to be quite frank, right? Kudos to all single parents out there. But it is challenging for young boys to look to their mother to learn how to be a man, right? So Jeremiah, you live with both your parents. I'm sure you look to your father, um, whether it is intentionally or unintentionally, meaning whether you are aware or you're unaware of it. You are looking directly at your father to learn how to be a man, learning how to become a man, right? You need somebody to look up to. And it's one of those reasons, just a side note, why it is um, a lot of these single parents, mothers especially, who can't, they don't have control of their sons because there's no strong male role model. So they look up to the gang leaders and so on, because these are the men who are basically strong, and it's teaching them how to be a man and this and that. And this is how they fall into the criminal elements, right? It's not necessarily their fault, right? Because they are just looking for guidance. So suggest three ways in which Paul's early death could have impacted his family. One, grief, right? The young boys could be grieving for their father, which could impact them in school negatively and so on. You don't know. Two, financially, I would say financially, because they are quite young. I would think, they're young teenage boys, they're still going to school. So Paul only being 43, he obviously might have been the provider and so on. Of course, this is just us suggesting, right? Um, and lastly, not having Paul around to guide the boys, not having that male father figure or that male figure to look up to, could lead them astray. Recommend three strategies that governments can utilize to help Caribbean men overcome their fears and misbeliefs about prostate cancer. Well, I would say one, early intervention. So having talks with young boys to lift that stigma, where having your prostates checked does not mean that you're gay. It does not mean you're like men, because that is the stigma. That is, they don't feel comfortable. Also indicates, so one, early intervention to lift the stigma, um, meaning you have conversations with them at the young age, so that as they grow and they understand, they realize that, hey, there's nothing wrong with having my prostates checked. That has no bearing on my sexuality or anything of the sort, right? Two, I would say our strategy that governments can use would be to educate the population. So educate the population the fact that the process can be checked through blood work, because a lot of persons don't understand that you don't necessarily need to have a DRE completed in order to have your prostates checked. The third one would definitely be to um, let's see, governments can utilize to overcome their fears and misbeliefs. Would definitely be, again, I would say, a certain level of education to really inform the public, the male public, that is, that prostate cancer doesn't only affect just a minor group, right? It can affect basically anybody. So being aware of the risks and who is at risk, most of all, is also important. So educating. So let's restate what are three strategies. One would be to start early intervention, maybe in schools and so on, to educate young boys about getting their prostates checked and letting them understand that in no way, shape, or form does it affect their sexuality. Two would be informing the general public that direct rectal exams or DREs don't necessarily need to happen. Blood work can also be a means by which the prostate could be checked. And the third one would be to definitely educate the public on who is at risk, who is most at risk of developing prostate cancer, right? All right, so we will hold off on these questions with meiosis and mitosis. So meiosis or meiosis, depending on whoever is teaching you, would pronounce it differently, right? These are genetic-based questions, and I don't want to confuse you. This here actually comes for every science. So when you see big B, small b, so the big letter is representative of what is dominant, and the small letter is representative of what is recessive. So what do we mean by dominant and recessive, right? So dominant would be the main thing that shows up from one parent to the next. So for instance, right, say your mom has hazel eyes, right? And all of her children came out with hazel eyes, right? It would then mean that genetically, right, the whatever is coding for that hazel eyes is dominant. It's showing up every single time that she has a child. Whereas, right, if it is their parents who both parents have blue eyes, all the kids have brown eyes, and then only one child comes out with green eyes, just say it. Green eyes or blue eyes, right? It would then mean that something is recessive because it's not dominant enough to show up in all of the offsprings, right? Could I let me see. Let me see if I could show you what I mean. Return to meeting. Um, there's supposed to be a whiteboard. Let's see. Hide annotators. Oh, I don't want to what to do. Let me stop sharing. Let me see. Okay, whiteboard. New whiteboard. Loading my whiteboard. It's taking a moment. Let me share screen. Sharing your screen will close the whiteboard for everyone. Do you want to continue? Continue, okay. So I can't, apparently I can't, All right, so let me see if I could then annotate. Anyway, it's recording. So it will show up anyway. I now realize I'm so silly. I now realize I'm recording. So new whiteboard. Create. Okay. Okay, so here I need to write. So here it has big B and little b, right? So in the question, let's see, in the question here, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but I'm going back to the question here. So it has black, brown. Okay, cool. Okay. So big B, right, is black color, right? And little b is brown color. So we're looking at Dalmatian dogs here, right? It's basically saying that this is the letter that they use to represent black, this is brown. So as I said, when it's dominant, we use big B, and when it's recessive, we use little b, right? So usually what we do is we draw up a nice little box here, right? I am so sorry that my box is so bent, but we take big B, little b, and we multiply it by big B, little b, right? So if you were to multiply big B by big B, you will get two big, so two B's, two capitals. Big B, or small b by big B would be big B and small b. Big B by small b, again, big B, small b, and small b by small b is just two small b's. So what does this show you, Jeremiah? It shows you, right, that if we were to cross these two parents, because this would be parent one multiplied by parent two, right? And we were to essentially mate these two animals. So this is dog one. I'll try to write the word dog. Dog one, and this is dog two. Here. Their offspring would be, one offspring would be all black for sure, which is dominant, has the dominant gene. So dominant always, Jeremiah, cancel out recessive. Something that is dominant means that it will mask the recessive. It will not, the recessive will not show up. So the recessive color is brown, the dominant color is black. So of the four offsprings here, you see three big B's, sorry, out of the four. So 3 out of 4, right, will be black because it has the dominant black gene, right? And 1 out of 4 will be brown. I'm so sorry that I can't write. I know that I could type, but I hope that you are able to understand my chicken scratches, right? Yes. So essentially, that is what that question is asking. So let's go back to the question and see if, we can see. Share screen. Continue. Okay. Excellent. Share. Nice. So again, let's hide these controls. So again, dominant allele for the black spot, big B. Recessive allele for the brown spot. Notice this dog has brown spot, small b. This is why when you have, say, a mother is giving birth to all these puppies, there are some that will come out plain white. Just one might come out white, and all the others will be black and white. And everybody is just rushed for this white dog. And that's because the recessive color is showing up there. Only 1 out of all of the offspring comes out that particular color. Everybody else has the dominant color, which is the black and white, right? So they're asking, in Dalmatian dogs, there are only 2 colors for their spots. Identify this type of variation. So these are things that we would cover. As I said, I don't want to confuse you too much with the genetics, right? But we will come back, we will revisit these questions. So we started looking at plasma. right? With the circulatory system. So list three substances transported by blood, because we covered this in the circulatory system when I looked at it, right? So we said hormones, blood transport hormones, they transport oxygen, they transport food and mineral substances, right? And I think we should stop there because so these questions actually will be covered when I finish all the other part of the circulatory system. So you get your 3 marks here. So far I've answered a question that has 3 marks. So it's 3, let's see, 3, and we answered 15. So 18 marks for sure out of this paper, right? I have answered for you, and that would be 18 sure marks that you would get if by chance Ms. Hiraman brings this question paper for final exam. So I don't want to give you like too much for you to get confused. So I really hope that you were able to understand my explanations. I hope that you were really able to understand how I explain the questions, how I'm able to answer the questions, and so on. And as I said, you feel free while I'm answering these questions, you can pause and write down the answers for the questions as you go along watching the video. All right, so take care of yourself and then the session now. Okay, let's see, stop sharing.